In this screencast, I want to show my new setup with my new Raspberry Pi and how I have connected it to the internet. So here you see my Raspberry Pi, which is connected to with a Ethernet cord to my router. So I have a web server running on my domain name toddbsmith.com, and how that works is toddbsmith.com is hosted at Rackspace. And at Rackspace, in my DNS settings for this domain, I have an A record. So pi.toddbsmith.com points to this IP address, and that IP address is my router's local IP address. And I haven't signed up for a static IP address, so that might change. So I'll have to do something about that if it does. So on my local area network, you can see my Raspberry Pi is plugged in with an Ethernet cable, and it's been given this local IP address .77, and I told my wireless router to make that a static IP address, so that'll always be the same for the Pi. So if we look in my router's firewall, you see that all the traffic is being, the SSH traffic and the web traffic on port 22 and port 80 are being directed to my Raspberry Pi. And I don't have to remember that IP address because of this A record in my DNS settings. So I can just type pi.toddbsmith.com and go to that IP address. So, for example, this is what index.html shows right now. So another thing I wanted to do was not have to actually get on my Pi to make changes. So I set up a public GitHub repo. So at this GitHub repo, if we look at the settings and the service hooks, I added a webhook URL, which is pi.toddbsmith.com.git/callbacks/getpull.php. So whenever somebody does a push to this repo, GitHub is going to send a post request to this URL with some information in it. And I'm not using that information, but this is my getpull.php script, and this is on the Pi. I don't even need this content header, but it just opens a file and kind of like a log, and just writes to the log and closes the file and then runs this command in the shell. So cd to /var/www, that's my document root for my web server, and then git pull. So it'll pull down those changes whenever somebody pushes them. So I'm at my local MacBook Pro, and I'm in the www directory, and I'm going to make another test. So let's say dbs.html. So I made that HTML file, saved it, git add dash capital A takes into account files that you may have deleted, and then git commit. So I added a dbs test, and then git pull, and then git push. And so I pushed it to GitHub, and GitHub should be calling that URL anytime now, so that if I go over here to my Pi and I do a list in that directory, not yet, there it is, dbs.html. So now on the web I should be able to go to dbs.html. Now I also installed Mongo on my Raspberry Pi. So I googled Mongo Pi and I followed the first link, and I followed these instructions. I need to install a bunch of software, clone the Mongo drivers, and install them. This command and this command took about an entire day. So I also went back to my router and its firewall, and I routed traffic from port 27017 and 28017 to my Raspberry Pi. So now if you go to pi.toddbsmith.com, port 28017, you can see the Mongo admin page. I set up a database called dogs that has information about my dogs, and on my local machine I wrote a simple Python script that connects to pi.toddbsmith.com on port 27017. It gets the database dogs, and for each dog it prints the name and age of the dog. And so here's the script running, and those are my 3 dogs. So if you ever need a Mongo database to play with, you can connect to my Raspberry Pi and play with it.